come all the way to the front row on either side here. And have everyone else be seated where you feel comfortable. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, interment will be at Adat Shalom Memorial Park Cemetery, located in Livonia, Michigan. At the family's request, we will not be traveling in procession to the cemetery. Anyone wishing to attend the interment at the conclusion of this service will drive on our own to the cemetery, and we will allow ample time before continuing with the committal service. There will be a brief informal gathering that will be held immediately following today's interment at the home of Jack and Rochelle Juni at 25595 York in Royal Oak for friends to call. Shiva will then continue on Sunday beginning at 3 p.m. through the evening at 2896 Sharon Drive here in Ann Arbor. Religious services will then be conducted Sunday at 4 p.m. It is suggested for those of you who wish to further honor Rachel's memory may do so by means of a contribution to a charity titled League for Yiddish Incorporated. We have this charity information on these printed out sheets here, as well as directions to the residences and the cemetery, which you may obtain at the conclusion of the service. Thank you.
בכל זמן, בית לא חפץ תחת השמיים, עת ללדת ועת למות, עת לטעת ועת לעקור נטוע, עת להרוג ועת לרפוא, עת לפרוץ ועת לבנות, עת לבכות ועת לשחוק, there's a time for every experience under the heavens, a time for being born and a time for dying, a time for planting and a time for uprooting the planted, a time for tearing down and a time for building up, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for throwing stones and a time for gathering them up, a time for embracing, a time for refraining, a time for seeking and a time for losing, a time for ripping and a time for sewing back up, and a time for silence and a time for speaking. Words of Kohelet. We're here both gathered in the sanctuary, and also we know so many people streaming the service and joining us by streaming to celebrate the life and memory of Rachel Juni, wife of over 71 years to Elliot, mother of Susanna Shoshka Reisel and Jack, and by marriage to Rochelle, grandmother to Eva and Alyssa, by marriage to Ryan and Luke, great-grandmother to two beautiful grandchildren, and one who is on the way and also in the front row. To close friends, old friends like Sam and Marilyn Krim, later friends at Brookdale, people like family to her, like Marian Dockery, and other friends who I've not named, and people who are like family to Rachel. We say there's a time for sadness and there's a time for celebrating and there's a time for speaking and a time for silence. The mourning period is a time of interspersed moments of silence and speaking. And this is a moment for that speaking. And we begin with Shoshi. She will be followed by Rochelle and then by Eva with Alyssa.
Okay, I have to do this right. Sorry. The final steep path to my precious mother's final decline, started on Mother's Day, just last Sunday, and she passed away 2 days after that. It was just 6 or 7 weeks before. It was. Can you hear me? Oh, I'm sorry. She passed away just 6 or 7 weeks before her 100th birthday. Rachel Geithheim Juni, age 99, passed away in her home in Ann Arbor, Michigan on May 10th, 2022. She was a graduate of the 3rd class of Queens College in Jamaica, Queens, New York, where she grew up, where she was working in her parents' small store after school every day, both in college and earlier. In her late teens, she met the great love of her life, Elliot Juni, Oliver Shalom, our father, who was the son of her parents' closest friends from Europe. The families originated in what was then Eastern Galicia in Austria-Hungary, in the area which is now known as southwestern Ukraine. They were married in March 1944 until our father's death, Elliot's death 6 years ago. My beautiful mother was known as Rachel or Rechela during most of her childhood, Ray during most of her adult life, and in recent years returning to her birth name Rachel. She and Elliot, my father's early travels, followed his pursuit of his PhD, leading eventually to Atlanta, Georgia, where he had a faculty position at Emory University, and finally here to Ann Arbor, where she supported him in his faculty and research position at the University Medical School. Their original plan for their marriage was that she would support him to get his PhD, and then he would support her when she got her PhD, and that they would work side by side in the laboratory doing research together, that they would raise their children equally as partners. She wanted to have at least 6 children. Well, not all of those plans materialized. However, profoundly, they did create an environment, a sviva, for their family, which was entirely of their own creative dreams, their own integrity for what they felt was right. They created a family lifestyle, what I would call a vibe, that was actually very, very different from anything they had experienced growing up. As the children of survivors of World War I, people who had experienced severely difficult, life-threatening conditions, they had to bear a heavy emotional load, which they managed to do with grace and respect. Yet what they wanted, their own creative dream, was to have a family full of joy, laughter, creativity, encouragement. I can't begin to adequately describe what a beautiful family life they invented, and they succeeded. Profound. In addition to my mother's continuing interest in science, which she discussed avidly with our father daily, she actively did many other things. The family was always her utmost focus, for whom she exemplified the Yiddish term balabosta, an always gracious host, homemaker, active parent, teacher, and guide to her children and grandchildren, and generous host to numerous close friends. She was an empath, unlike anyone else I've ever met, who truly and deeply cared about others. She loved people. She loved flowers. She loved spiders. She loved life. It is impossible to describe the love, creativity, intelligence, and pure joy she endlessly radiated. I could personally rattle off 66 years of thousands, millions of examples, but I do realize there's not enough time today, so don't worry. In the early 1960s, Rachel and Elliot actively campaigned, including door to door in the South, for civil rights and continued political work their whole lives. My mother volunteered to work at the polls every election until she physically couldn't anymore. My parents also enjoyed membership in many square dance clubs, including their favorite type called Challenge Level, which involved memorizing almost 1,000 dance formation calls. Their related papers about the square dancing are currently archived in the Elliot and Rachel Juni Challenge Square Dance collection of the New Hampshire Library of Traditional Music and Dance. And just learned the other day from our dear friend Ken that that collection was carefully indexed online. Rachel was a very accomplished but terribly self-effacing artist who worked with fiber art, abstract paintings, and more. She donated countless hours to various volunteer activities, including work in the library right across the hall here at Beth Israel Synagogue, the Ann Arbor Hadassah, and the early years of the Washtenaw Jewish News. Starting about 25 years ago, she became an ardent Yiddishist, working to preserve our ancestral language. In that regard, she participated for decades in 2 weekly Ann Arbor Yiddish groups, one of which she created and hosted herself. During COVID, she continued to participate weekly in the Ann Arbor Yiddish Tish up until just a few weeks ago, and several other Yiddish groups on Zoom. My mother had a gentle yet profound effect on many, but for me personally, my mother was my angel, my liaison with God, my muse, my Wegweiser, my life coach guide, my mentor, my heart and soul. This is an eternal reality. Every day for the past few years, all she wanted from me was that I should play guitar for her. So I did every day, our private concert, by Zoom during the first year and a half of COVID, and then in person when we moved in together back in Ann Arbor, which was just in late December. She requested my guitar playing daily from the moment I woke up before breakfast until we finally did it, usually in the evening after dinner. I was keenly aware that she wanted it so desperately for the sole reason that she knew how important playing guitar is for me. As her unfortunate fatal disease progressed over the past 7 years or so, I keenly felt that she was living for me, not only me, but for me. Even in her decline, she never stopped supporting, encouraging, and helping me. So of course I was playing guitar for her as she took her last breaths. She wanted that. Most of my adult life, I often said to myself, and sometimes right out loud to others, that anyone who knows me needs to be aware, because when my mother goes, I'll simply fall apart, that I just couldn't know how I could go on, how to be without her. Well, listen to this. As she was dying in her last moments, I palpably felt her soul and her spirit surround me in a warm radiance from deep inside my body. Now I realize how I can go on. I miss her so terribly, but honestly, her soul and spirit are right here, deep inside me forever, and I'm not the only one. I feel that she is also inside every person who loved her, just like that, right now. So she's here, and we love her always. She made me who I am. Our spirits will always be entwined. I do want to thank each one of you whose lives she touched, who were able to be here today to honor her memory, her life, including those who are here via live stream on the internet. And thank you, Dorfmans, for that. This discussion about our Ray, Rachel, Mom, Grandma, will continue throughout the rest of our portions of the time-space continuum, which comprise the rest of our lives. I give thanks to my family that we can be together, forever shaped by our amazing, creative, warm, gracious, loving, intelligent progenitors. We can only strive to walk that pathway. It's a beautiful goal to follow in those footsteps. Please let us never stop trying. And let's never stop recounting her precious ways, her bountiful gifts of love, care, and gentleness to everyone she ever met. My mother's teachings are for me personally like my personal Torah.
For those who don't know, I am Rochelle. I am Rachel's daughter-in-law. Oh, okay, sir. Okay. Over the years, I have had many friends who have spoken to me about their mothers-in-law. Some of them had wonderful, loving relationships, but others were kind of contentious and difficult. I, however, was definitely one of the lucky ones. I had Rachel Juni as my mother-in-law. Mom accepted me completely from the very beginning, even before Jack and I were married. She had such a sweet, gracious manner that made everyone she met feel instantly comfortable. She always strived to create a harmonious environment for family and guests. Her greatest concern was that everyone's needs had to be met. Of course, there had to be plenty of snacks even before dinner, and then another snack for the road after dinner. And she was such a loving mother and grandmother, doting on her granddaughters, Eva and Alyssa. She babysat for them when they were very young. And when we would thank her, she would say, "No, thank you for giving me such pleasure." In her later years, after she developed Alzheimer's, she wasn't able to be the loving hostess that she had been when she was younger. She had difficulty conversing, I think because she had lost so much of her memory and she was a bit embarrassed about it. One thing, though, is that she always knew who the members of her family were. She never lost that. She might not have been able to pull up the names right away, but she knew who you were. So she made up for her lack of memory by calling everybody darling, darling, or sometimes darling, 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 darling. It was her way of still connecting with people in her very gracious, loving way. I believe she is with us in spirit here. However, if she were here in the flesh, she would say to each and every one of you here and who are on the broadcast, darling, 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 darling. And you would know that you were accepted and loved.
We're gonna invite up the end us up, and then we're gonna finish with the poem. There's a last minute. We thought it would be beautiful.
Sorry, didn't get them out. Okay. Thank you all for coming here today to honor our Grandma Rachel. Our family is very grateful for all of the love and support. And we'd like to extend a special thank you to the caregivers who hopefully are watching online, who cared for Grandma during her last years and days of her life. Your tenderness and devotion to our grandma did not go unnoticed. And we are very grateful to have had you as part of our family. Family was the most important thing to Grandma. Growing up, we were always together for holidays and Shabbos dinners. And our grandparents never missed a dance recital or a school play or birthday party. And Grandma was always there to help and support and be with pride. Grandma showed her love through caretaking. After entering her home, you were always smothered with hugs and kisses and asked a dozen times if there was anything you needed. You're thirsty, you needed a nosh. And grandma never let you help cook, except maybe to open a really stuck pickle jar. And then you were just the strongest person ever. Grandma wanted to care for you. And it wasn't just through big family dinners, but also gallon-sized Ziploc bags of snacks for the drive home from Ann Arbor. And grandma loved through her service to the family and taught us to do the same. Grandma always wanted everyone to be smiling and comfortable at all times. Bad moods, anger, fighting, it was not allowed in her house. Sad topics were not discussed and negative judgments were not spoken. My father used to joke that the worst thing grandma ever said about a bad restaurant meal was that it was only adequate. While living in a happy only world may seem like an incomplete expression of human experience, I believe that grandma's insistence on optimism came out of her parents' difficult past, leaving Europe with literally just the clothes on their backs, their money sewn into the lining of their jackets. Grandma's parents never talked about the tragic deaths of the family they left behind, choosing instead to focus on their new lives as Americans. Grandma always focused on the blessings of our lives and the sweetness of our togetherness. Grandma loved fiercely and stubbornly, often telling us not to forget how much we are loved. And she loved you, and if you don't like it, she'll fight you. And grandma was the most loving, accepting person we've ever known. It was unconditional. Grandma didn't need you to get all A's or be impressive in your career or live a certain lifestyle. She just wanted you to enjoy what you were doing. She wanted you to have joy. When I was with grandma last weekend, one of the last things she said to me was that she just wants everyone to be happy. And that's how grandma leaves us, with a reminder to find our joy in life. And we will miss her very much. Thank you.
I'm going to share a few words on behalf of the tradition, followed by a poem, so we can finish with the poetry that Jack wrote. Later today, the family will begin reciting the Mourner's Kaddish. And the Kaddish prayer was originally recited after studying words of scripture, of Torah, which set for us a holy example of how to love. And at some point, the Kaddish would be recited during the mourning periods for a loved one. The tradition reflects the reality we all know, that people too are sacred texts that teach. Memory, grief are acts of reading the text anew, receiving a wisdom written in words of action and love. So I'd like to share just a few of the stories the family shared with me last night, and I hope I don't get them wrong because I'm learning this Torah anew. Torah is a story of ancestors taking the wisdom of their ancestors, but to new places, and creating new starts for the Jewish people. Rachel's parents came to the United States following World War I, as we heard, with their papers and the little money they had sewn in the linings of their clothes, which proved to be a lifesaver, given that Jews were being harassed and were harassed and robbed on the train ride to the boat. In biblical proportions of moving from one place to another and starting over, they started over in New York. Like Elliot's parents, alav hashalom, Rachel's brought their Jewishness with them. Their Yiddishkeit, their Yiddish, their celebration of the holidays with real joy, and their Jewish pride and Jewish values, and planted them in the new soil of America. Rachel grew up going to school at Queens College in the 3rd class while working at her parents' dry goods store. Having no relatives of their own, they made new relatives, a new tribe, with the other Jews around them, gathering for fun and celebration. Elliot at the time was skeptical of these gatherings, but came after taking the advice to come meet Rachel and hear her play piano, as they shared a love of music beyond the popular modes of the time. Though she was too self-effacing to play in front of him, a character trait that followed her entire life, they fell for each other. And their over 71-year marriage is a testament to the very meaning of romantic and covenantal love. The taking your Yiddish and your love of Jewishness with you and Lech Lecha, going and starting over in a new place, occurred again with the family that Elliot and Ray made together and settled in Ann Arbor in the late 60s. This time they formed a new tribe again, this time with, among others, Marilyn and Sam Krim, Selma and Al Sussman, Bobby and Mike Levine, and Claire and Iz Bernstein. May those who are of blessed memory be loved, and may those here with us today be consoled and find comfort in their memories of love, friendship, and l'chaim. Jack and Susanna Roshka-Reisel grew up happy. Their cousins, meaning the Krim, Sussman, Levine, and Bernstein kids, were a tight-knit family. The men, all tremendous leaders in their fields, let their hair down with one another, telling jokes, laughing uproariously. So often I'm told the long shaggy dog stories would end with the Yiddish punchline that the kids couldn't understand. No wonder Shoshka Reisel is such a Yiddishist. Ray and Elliot's group created these new starts in Ann Arbor and wrote new chapters in the story of the Jewish people. Not only helped building the Mishkan of Ann Arbor here at Beth Israel, but as we heard, creating the Washington Jewish News, the working and building the Beth Israel Library, and the Hadassah cookbook, which I told the family still existed in many revisions and we received as a gift moving here a short time ago. Celebrating all the holidays, bringing alive the community, they were key parts of creating the Jewish community that now thrives in Ann Arbor, and their legacy lives on. The Torah is also a story of holiness. And here in the chapters of Leviticus, where the scrolls are rolled at the time, which we've been studying, holiness is defined not by belief, but by behavior. How you love others as much as yourself, which we just read. How you include and don't judge the stranger and the immigrant and the other around you, which we recently read. How you behave in a way that teaches others and makes them better by being around you. And Rachel was a Torah of that holiness. She was utterly self-effacing. Like the initial shyness of playing for Elliot, she was a gifted artist. And as we heard from Shoshi, she decried the value of her own work. At one point, after selling one of those pieces of art you described, she sought the buyer to return their money, feeling her art not worth it, or so the story goes. She was terrifically humble. That is the highest character trait according to the Talmud, and one she shared with Moses in our tradition, who felt his voice was not good enough to be the conveyor of Torah. It was, and Rachel's was and is. And that came through all who knew her. She made herself small sometimes, so others could feel larger. And as Eva told me repeatedly, that's because she was always taking care of others. And that's humility, and that's love, and that's moral example. And she lived that life of radically including others. According to countless family stories, I really could go on very long, as Shoshi said, she was the least judgmental person on earth. As her children and grandchildren attest to, she was utterly accepting with no judgment. When Alyssa and Luke brought entirely new ways of celebrating life and spiritual identity, Rachel was ready to party and wanted to know all about the clothes and the instruments. When Eva came to visit with her hair cut very short, Rachel thought and knew it was beautiful and so cute. Rachel, like the Torah, embodied holiness in who she was, how she walked in the world in every gesture. Our values are our behavior, not our beliefs, as Elliot and Rachel revealed in their own Mount Sinai moment to their children. And finally, the Torah means teaching. The word Torah means teaching. It's about dedication to Jewish values and passing them on, not through didactic speeches, because it's about people, about experiences, and about teaching wisdom through love. Rachel's way of being in the world was about teaching not through talking at you, but about guiding you in that humble way to your own truth. She was the mother who left books or pamphlets around for you to read yourself. She was the mother who would ask you questions when you had a different view. Always a discussion of a divergence of opinions, that Jewish value. She was she didn't ever make you feel, I'm told, like you should change who you are just to become wiser. She was a fount of gentle moral principles. Don't stare at people. You kids can argue and work it out yourselves, but at some point you're returning to the table because you love each other and we're a family. You may be very distinguished in your field, but you're going to be home for dinner because it's family. That is a rare way to teach. She was a Torah, as Shoshi said. She was a book of guiding principles, of quiet little gems, of total dedication to creating an idyllic childhood for her children and grandchildren, total dedication to Jewish values, and total dedication to family. May her soul be at peace, and may it continue to be intertwined with the souls of her precious ones in this world, and now with the souls of her precious ones in the next. Now it's time for Jack's poem.
Every skyscraper has an inner structure, an invisible skeleton of iron girders, an invisible skeleton.
Every skyscraper has an inner structure, an invisible skeleton of iron girders with the strength to support the rest of the building. A knowledgeable architect looks at such a building, strong and tall, and for the best one says, "Good bones, good bones." Rachel, Juni's strength and love were the bones at the core of our family, supporting and lifting us as high as we could rise. Not too long ago, she fell and broke her thigh bone, although she had been ill for some time. Despite the efforts of family and loving caregivers, this fall and fracture precipitated her death. And there is a poem called Bones. I'm going to read
I'll try again.
that.
Tibia, femur, fibula, bones short, bones long. With them, you ran fast.
Danced with grace, stood proud. Hips that birthed two well-loved babes, spine of strength, skull of wit, hands you used to get things done, ribs that held a heart uncaged, shoulders holding the world at times, arms that gave love sweet caress. Long and well these bones have served you, striding earth, dancing, following love. Yet all the while the earth kept singing, singing its siren song, calling, entreating, yearning for your return. Resist, resist, long you have resisted, so many years and so many more. But sometimes feet don't follow will, a misplaced step, a busy thought. Earth reaches up to claim its own. Falling, yes, but never fallen. Rising on bones, now thin and frail, each time more slowly, each time less sure. Till one day the earth reached out and grabbed you in grasping ambush. It yanked you down, desperate with years of yearning to hold you close. And down you tumbled, spinning, flailing handholds mere inches out of reach. Those bones, they cracked. Those bones, they crumbled, shattered glass. How could they fail you after years so faithful, disloyal servants, a harsh betrayal? The earth is such a desperate lover. Hugs that hurt, embrace that cripples, tearing you from family, friends, claiming at last its long-sought desire. But you, O woman of beauty, of dancing heart, you dance on still. You are not claimed, you are your own and will forever be ours.
The Jewish memorial prayer is a serenade for the soul, that it may return to its other home in God, made of pure compassion, intertwined with the souls in the next world, but also continually intertwined with the souls to whom she is connected in this world. Il Malei Rachamim, Shochen Ba'Miromim, Hamtzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim, Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia, Mazhirim, Benishmat Rucho Bat Meir Tzvi, Velonka, Shachal Olama, Began Eden, Tehe Menuchata, Ana Baal Harachamim, Hastireha Beseta Kenafecha Leolamim, Utzror Bitzror HaChayim, Et Nishmata, Adonai Hu Nachlata, V'tanuach B'Shalom, Al Mishkavaha, B'Noma, Amen. As we next proceed to burial, the family is going to be gathering at the door so that people can express their wishes and check in with them and condolences, because we know not everyone can go to the burial. We also know that we have the opportunities that are also listed on a sheet outside with location and directions for Shiva times and visitation times. And one of those times is 3 p.m. on Sunday with the service at 4. And we also know that not everyone will be able to join in person. But for that storytelling session, people are welcome to email me or email the family with reminiscences and memories. And we would be happy to share them and speak them for you in person in that room. At this time, I ask you to rise. We ask the family to head toward the door and then wait for the others to exit so that they can greet them. And after those brief greetings, family and I and others who are heading toward the interment will proceed. Oseh shalom bimroma, Uya asa shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. We may now exit ourselves, express our condolences, and for those who are proceeding to the interment, please proceed.